4 summers before the English landed at Plymouth, my father was out on the Great Salt Sea in the moonlight when he heard a song on the wind that pierced his heart with the arrow of its beauty. Voices singing in the distance with words not known. The song promised to speak to us of a love without ending and a joy beyond telling. We were all eager to hear what the song would speak to us. All learned the melody, but no one knew the words. Until one night, my father heard the song again. Those who heard the song remembered the melody and passed it on to their tribes. The song awakened a hunger within our people to know the voice calling to us. It lifted their spirits towards the one who made the moon and the stars. It called out to them like a father calling to his child. But they knew not how to answer. After the English settled at Plymouth, my father heard the song again coming from the meeting house. Our people knew the tune as well as the white men. My father was with his cousins and ran to the meeting house. They only wanted to know the words to the song on the wind so that they would know how to answer its call. The English did not understand this. 13 years later, as my father lay dying of smallpox, those English who cared for him sang the same song again. This time, he heard the words with understanding, and he believed.
In the early 1600s, Concord looked much like these woods. The only people that lived there were the Indians of the Massachusetts tribe. They spoke the Algonquin language.
They didn't come into contact often with colonists until 1631, when John Eliot came to them as a missionary. He took the time to learn the Algonquin language to try to communicate and evangelize the Indians. The first convert from the Indians was Wabun, the sachem of the Massachusetts tribe.
Before Wabun was sachem, his father-in-law Hatuan was sachem. The tribe was sparse in numbers in the 1630s because of the diseases the settlers had brought. They had more land than they needed.
A group of English settlers had come to the New World, and they needed some land. The Indians had an area that they called Musketaquid, meaning grass-grown, which was where one of their principal villages was. The Indians were willing to sell 6 square miles of the area of Musketaquid to the new colonists. This was made possible by John Eliot's good relationship with the Indians and other leaders' connections in England.
These colonists, led by Peter Bulkeley and John Eliot, named their land Concord, meaning peace or harmony, because of the peaceful relations they had with the Indians. This name was unusual because most settlements were named after English towns. This was also the first settlement in the Massachusetts Bay Colony to be beyond tidewaters.
John Eliot continued to be a missionary to the Indians. He successfully wrote the Bible in the Algonquin language. This is very important because this was the first time the Algonquin language had been put into writing. So by teaching the Indians the Bible, Eliot also taught them how to read and write their own language.
The Indians who converted to Christianity made their own village called Natick, which means place of searching, and they became known as the Praying Indians. The Indians and the settlers lived and traded in peace.
Then, in 1675, King Philip's War broke out. Relationships between all Indians and colonists became wary, though people who knew the Praying Indians well, like John Eliot, knew there was nothing to fear from them. Some colonists refused to trust any Indians.
For fear that they might join King Philip in war, the General Court ordered that all Praying Indians be moved to Deer Island, a small island in the Bay Harbor, owned by Daniel Henchman. Henchman forbade the Indians from cutting down trees, hunting, and starting fires. Indians captured during the war were also brought to Deer Island. Some Indians were poached and sold into slavery in the Caribbean.
Without any of these abilities, many of the Indians died of starvation and exposure to the elements. John Eliot tried to bring supplies to the Indians, but his boat was capsized by angry colonists, and he almost died. Despite this, he took whatever supplies he could save and brought them to Deer Islands. It was December, and none of them had adequate clothing or living spaces.
Elliot reported this to the other colonists and tried to get the Indians off the island. He and Daniel Gookin did everything in their power to get the Indians off Deer Island. But it wasn't until 1676, after the war had ended, that the praying Indians were allowed to leave.
John Elliot and Daniel Gookin paid for the removal of the Indians from Deer Island out of their own pockets. Half the Indians brought there died.
Daniel Gookin saw the removal of the Indians to Deer Island as work of Satan that stopped the spread of Christianity to the Indians, as said in his book, an historical account of the doings and sufferings of the Christian Indians in New England.
Gookin wondered why accounts from people who knew the Indians had not been asked for before sending the praying Indians to Deer Island, because everyone who knew them agreed that they wouldn't have joined the war.
The Indians who returned home to Natick found their homes destroyed and looted.
The Natick Praying Indians are the only remaining praying Indian tribe. Their current saint's name is Caring Hands. In 2012, they are allowed for the first time to worship in their original church, called Elliott Church, in South Natick. They haven't been allowed to worship there for 300 years.
Deer Island still stands in Boston Harbor. It is now a sewage treatment plant.
Concord is now a thriving town with a population of 17,668 as of 2010. Many of the original houses of colonists are still there.
Now we're going to show you a video of today's praying Indians.
These are descendants of the original praying Indians. They are shown here playing their sacred drum.